Final Fantasy V-2 is incredible.
Nope.
What? Bravely Default is still one of the best Final Fantasy games we have, and this HD remaster is the perfect way to play it. If you're not sure if this game is still worth buying after coming out so long after its original debut on the 3DS, the short answer is yes. Though I'll touch on that keycard situation because why is this a thing? So shout out to Square Enix for giving me a code to try this one out again. I'll be real, this one was even better than I expected. But before we get into it, if you're a fan of retro games with a major dose of RPGs and nostalgia, then why don't you destroy that subscribe button before it drags you into oblivion? All right, let's get into it. Back in the early 2010s, the JRPG scene was, well, let's just say it was uncertain, quiet, dare I say boring. Turn-based systems were kind of on the decline, and there was a rise of action JRPGs, which, wasn't terrible or anything, but even Final Fantasy was exploring new battle mechanics that kind of left the fans of the classics wondering, are we the problem?
No, it's the children who are wrong.
But quietly on the Nintendo 3DS, this handheld console that many of us, including myself, took a while to warm up to, something was stirring. And that something was Bravely Default. Or I don't know, maybe it was the indigestion from Del Taco. The world may never know.
Why would we have stopped at Del Taco?
This wasn't just some new IP, it was the spiritual and mechanical successor of Final Fantasy, the Four Heroes of Light, and in many cases, a lot of the classic Final Fantasies. Four Heroes of Light was a game that already dipped its toes into the retro job system and a charming storybook aesthetic, but Bravely Default was like the full send. It was Square Enix through their new partnership with Silicon Studios saying, hey, you want a real modern classic? Let's bring back the old school Final Fantasy. And man, did they deliver on that classic formula. Crystals, check. Four heroes, of course. But this time with the trauma of one's family being, sucked into a black hole and being the only survivor. Real lighthearted stuff, right? It had a world map, turn-based combat, and jobs galore. But this wasn't just nostalgia, it was innovation too. The Brave and Default system turned simple battles into these risk-reward strategy sessions. You could save up turns, you could blow them all at once and take out an enemy in one round, or overextend and leave yourself wide open and probably die. It made even random battles feel kind of tense. Well, if you didn't grind like crazy, but I don't know, who would do that? Now, personally, I was a little late to the 3DS, not because I didn't want one, I did, but because money was tight and early on the game library just didn't really make it feel like a must-buy for me. But then Fire Emblem Awakening dropped and it absolutely floored me. And side note, yes, I still need to do another Fire Emblem video, so keep an eye out for that. And around the same time, I finally gave Pokemon Black and White a shot after sleeping on those for way too long. And both games really opened my eyes to how strong the 3DS library with backwards compatibility had become, and how much I just needed more portable JRPG goodness in my life. Maybe one day Pokemon will actually give us a proper Gen 5 remake. Pokemon? The original hit Japan in 2012 and came to the West in 2014, back when I was doing a lot of traveling for work, about to move from California to Chicago, and needed a game that I could just live inside while on a plane. So when Bravely Default appeared on the horizon, I was super pumped. And then they dropped that demo, and it wasn't just a taste of the game. It had our combat and our missions and things like that, but they gave us the ability to build up Norende Village before the game even came out. And on the 3DS, you could recruit Street Pass friends to speed up the construction and get items and things like that for your game, and that progress would transfer to the full game. I was all aboard the Bravely Default hype train at that point. And seriously, I am a sucker for demos that transfer stuff like that to the full game. Like, shoutouts to Dragon Quest XI's because that demo was sick. But again, tight budget, so what did I do? I scrimped, I saved, and I cashed in credit card points to buy it at launch. And when it finally landed in my hands, man, it felt special. Like, this was the prized game that I worked so hard to get. It was everything that I wanted at that time. Something strategic, nostalgic, polished, and rewarding. A job system that let me just break the game in all of the best ways. I mean, say no more. For a lot of us, it was the turn-based revival we didn't really realize we needed. Now, in 2025, we have the HD remaster on the Switch 2. Visually cleaner, UI updates, faster load times, smooth performance, the works. It feels like the definitive version that we always imagined the original could be, but here's the thing. We're living in an era overflowing with JRPGs. Turn-based is thriving again. We've got remakes, reboots, brand new series coming out. So the big question is, does Bravely Default HD still hit the same way it did back on the 3DS era? Or has time and an avalanche of JRPGs dulled its impact? Let's find out. The moment I booted up Bravely Default HD Remaster on the Switch 2, my jaw just dropped. Square Enix, y'all didn't just upscale this game, you guys transformed it. That opening cinematic was stunning, absolutely gorgeous. Seeing Eri come out and address you as the player, Agnes getting sucked into the darkness, hearkening you, the player, to become the warrior of light. Then you're introduced to Ringabel, Morgana, Sothis, Edea, and then good old Tiz. Enjoying, being in a sleepy town where his entire family and everybody he knows gets sucked into a hole and he loses everything that he loves, including his brother, whose hand slips out of his hand and plummets to his death. Should I be enjoying this? Well, it's quite the start. The intro made me wish that those other 3DS-era RPGs that I loved, like Fire Emblem Awakening, would get this kind of a treatment. Like, just imagine Chrom and the gang looking this crisp. I'd be even more unproductive. And then, before I knew it, I was totally ignoring the trauma. Tiz is totally fine, right? I mean, he'll get over it. And I was back to rebuilding Norende. The rebuilding mechanic, which originally relied on Street Pass, has been brilliantly adapted for the Switch 2. Now, as you explore the world, you encounter these little player ghosties on the map. Oh, they're so cute in a creepy kind of way. Once recruited, they not only help you instantly rebuild parts of Norende faster, yes please, but they can also be summoned in battle for that sweet little bonus smackdown. It's clever, it keeps you connected to the wider player base, and it makes grinding for rewards a lot more fun. And listen, I may or may not have remembered a little trick to speed up the Norende process using the internal clock of the system that you're playing on, kind of making it feel like a New Game Plus or something right out of the gate, right? Let's just say I had some pretty ridiculous gear by the time I was technically still early game. Look, you guys, you know I love breaking these systems, and Bravely Default practically invites you to do it. That said, a few things caught me off guard coming back to this after all these years, which we'll get to. And I gotta be real with you here, the party chats and the early dialogue, woof. They are dense, and not in the rich character development kind of way. It's more like, okay, yes, Ringabel, I get it, you like women. Can we please move on?
Your love has pierced my heart as a thorn would.
I was playing through one of the early sections of that Flower Town arc, and between the over-the-top fashion obsession and those weird innuendos, I had to just straight up put my Switch down when my kids were around. But look, despite that, the core gameplay loop is still addictive. It's why I'm here, and I imagine that's what's gonna get you in the door as well. I hit level 50 by chapter 2. Because, that's what heroes do. The battle system is just that good. You're toggling between Brave and Default, mixing job passive, optimizing those skill builds. It's turn-based heaven for job system lovers and min-maxers. And this game rewards you for getting through battles quickly, with bonus experience and job points. So being over-leveled can actually be to your advantage when you're trying to level up those specific jobs that you're trying to build. Except, when the enemies are still somehow able to get first strike on you for no discernible reason whatsoever. Like, I'm level 50, they're level 22. Why in the world are they going first? It doesn't make any sense. If this random bat poison slaps me before I could move, suddenly I get no bonus? Come on, Square. That's just rude.
Come on, son.
But honestly, even with all of those nitpicks, I was still glued to this game. The loop pulled me back in like no time had passed. Norende was thriving, finished being built. My job combos were becoming increasingly more broken, and my nostalgia and enjoyment was fully activated. And I'm sorry, but can we talk about the fact that Square Enix just decided to drop like Feeder Rhythm Bravely Default in the middle of this game? They were like, hey, you want to learn the Switch 2 mouse controls? How about a full game inside here where you can play through all of the music, just like Feeder Rhythm Final Bar Line or Melodies of Memory? Which, shout out to those games, because those games are awesome, they don't get enough love. Anyway, moving on. If you'd asked me back in 2014 whether Bravely Default would stick with me because of the characters, I probably would have shrugged. I remember the gameplay, I remember the vibe, but now revisiting it through this remaster, yeah, the cast kind of hits a bit harder than I expected, but, you know, not always for the best reasons. Let's start with Tiz. He is dependable, no frills, we gotta do what's right kind of guy. Is he the deepest character in JRPG history? No, but his sincerity sort of keeps the party grounded when things go off the rails, which, let's be honest, happens quite a bit. Agnes, on the other hand, kind of surprised me on this replay. I remember her being reserved, the stoic type, but early game Agnes, she's kind of spicy and suspicious of everyone. She's like side-eyeing left and right, and while I liked that at first, it kind of gave her more personality than I remembered. It does sort of undercut some of the moments that we get later on where her judgment just seems, I don't know, inconsistent. Like, you were the one doubting all of these people from the jump, and now this seems fine to you? Okay. Then we get Ring a Bell, aka Flirt Mode Eternal Edition. I'm not gonna lie, this dude grated on me every time he was around. His obsession with wooing every woman within a 10-mile radius just gets old really fast, especially when half the party chats devolve into thinly veiled innuendo. That said, his arc does go to some surprisingly heartfelt places, and his voice actor, Spike Spencer, somehow makes that transition from comic relief to actual depth work pretty well. By mid-game or so, I found myself begrudgingly rooting for this guy. I'm still skipping half of that early banter though, because seriously, dude, I don't care. And then there's Idea, the certified real one of the group. She's that sharp-tongued, funny, and consistently calling everyone out, especially Ring a Bell, which immediately earns her respect in my book. Her voice actress, Erin Fitzgerald, absolutely kills it with her delivery, giving Idea that perfect balance of sass and sincerity. But here's the thing with Idea that kind of hit me on replay. Idea's sort of black and white moral compass gets real shaky when you sort of stop and think about it. At the start, her sense of justice is her strength. She defects from her homeland because she realizes that things are seriously wrong, and that's a huge moment. But then almost immediately, she starts treating every new enemy like they're irredeemably evil based on the thinnest evidence. And sure, early bosses like the merchant who is in cahoots with the thieves and they're extorting townspeople for water, or the black mage that just wants to burn down the entire village. Yeah, they are sort of comically evil. I get it. And it makes it easy to see why she'd be like, "Murder, bad guy." But it's clear the game is stacking the deck on purpose to justify her view of the world. By the time we meet more nuanced characters like the Valkyrie, that sort of black and white worldview starts to feel less like strong conviction and more like classum pendulum swing syndrome. Like, Idea, sweetheart, you just had your entire worldview flipped upside down, and you're positive you got it right this time? It doesn't really ruin her arc, but it does raise some questions about how much she's actually grown as a character, or if she's just found this new dogma to follow. Now, in terms of delivery, as in the voice work, the writing, and how the characters interact, it's honestly a bit of a mixed bag in kind of the best way. The voice acting ranges from solid to charmingly awkward, but even the awkwardness has that warm, like early 2010s charm, like you're watching a really good community theater performance where everyone's really giving it their all. And with all that said, stick around for the ride, because the chemistry does come together as the story progresses. And once you get past the fluff, these characters start to click in a way that makes a journey feel like it's more than just a grind fest. They're not perfect, but they're distinct, memorable, and full of moments that will make you care, sometimes in spite of yourself. But we all know what we're all really here for, right? It's the combat system, of course! This is the bread and butter of this game. The Brave and Default mechanics allow for a depth of strategy that's both rewarding and at times hilariously exploitable. And it still feels fresh, even today. You can default to defend and store up actions, or you can go all in with Brave, spending turns like there's a Steam sale and you're not really worried about the hole of debt that you're about to go into even after buying 100 more games. I'll never play these games, but they were such good deals! It's the kind of system that sounds simple until you really start messing with it. Planning multi-turn chains, preloading entire combo sequences, exploiting elemental weaknesses, and dropping 4 attacks in one round like you're trying to end a boss fight in a single screen flash. When it clicks, it's so good. And I don't remember if this was in the original, but you can set up this auto attack loadout for your characters. So when you're grinding and can brave ×4 to basically one-shot all of the enemies and speed things up, you can now set it and forget it, which is a super nice addition to the fact that you could do 4 times speed for these battles as well. Boss battles will turn that auto battle off so you can focus on your strategy, and it makes the entire experience feel so much more seamless. Which is great, but the real magic happens when you start experimenting with the job system, crafting combinations that can turn your parties into these unstoppable forces. Not only do you have access to the classic Final Fantasy jobs like Knight, White Mage, Black Mage, Thief, and Monk, but you're unlocking new ones constantly, and each one comes with its own passive abilities that you can mix and match with other jobs. So yeah, you can have a ninja that uses black magic, or you can have a Valkyrie with time mage support, or, you know, a dual-wielding sword magic ninja that can do 160k damage in one turn with some support from a red mage and a spirit master. No big deal. And if you've played Final Fantasy V or Final Fantasy Tactics, the job combination should feel very familiar. But the variety of jobs and their skills in the game can make those combos feel very interesting and super fun to destroy the game with. You want to cheese that final boss? You absolutely can, and I'm here for it. In order to maximize my grinding, a bad habit I love to continue, I started grinding up the Freelancer class to get that bonus job point skill for the rest of my jobs. Because, you know, you need to grind in order to better grind. Makes sense, right? Would you like some grind with your grind on top of your grind in order to grind? Now, the game will still challenge you in certain areas. Even if you're nuts and hit level 50 by Chapter 2 like me, you can be overleveled and still get wrecked if you're not smart about how you go about using your turns and a good job setup. The game wants you to engage with its mechanics. You can't just brute force it with Tiz swinging a sword like there's no tomorrow. I mean, you can, but it's still advisable to think about your strategy, especially for later on. If you haven't figured out a good job setup, then maybe brute forcing it will get you more than halfway through the game, but some of those bosses at the end will absolutely destroy you. Still, that's a small complaint, if I can even call that a complaint, in what is otherwise one of the most engaging, flexible, and deeply satisfying turn-based systems I've played. And let's not forget, this was first on the 3DS. Now, with the Switch 2's remaster, you get those clean visuals in addition, smoother transitions, and that faster pace. It never looked or felt this good. But if there's one thing Bravely Default absolutely nails, even back on the 3DS debut, it's the atmosphere. And in this remaster, the vibe gets this full-on HD glow-up that makes every town, dungeon, and world map section feel like it was handcrafted in this pop-up storybook by a bunch of nostalgic Square Enix veterans. And I mean that in the best way possible. Seriously, I booted up the game, got to the first town, and had to just sit there for a second and look. The hand-painted backgrounds, the delicate lighting, it's like a JRPG diorama you want to just live inside. The new HD remaster takes what was already charming and cranks up the clarity so high I wouldn't be surprised if some fan out there tries to 3D print these towns and mount them on their wall. And while Bravely Default does take a more linear approach in terms of story progression, it never feels claustrophobic. There's an actual world map, a glorious callback to the classic Final Fantasies, and you better believe I was scouring every corner for chests and secrets and optional bosses. Now, one thing I will say here that can be kind of disappointing is that while there is an open map and side dungeons to explore, sometimes they get locked based on story progression. And I don't know about you, but I don't love walking to a new place, excited to explore, find new items, maybe get some new equipment or weapons, and then you get that old, like, Professor Oak, now's not the time to do this thing message. Why couldn't I just ride my bike in a Poke Center, Professor Oak? And when did you become this ghost in my head anyway? The dungeons, while not the most complex ever designed, do get the job done. They're often more straightforward corridors with some side paths, but every now and then there's this clever mechanic or fun gimmick to shake things up. Or really horrible mechanics like being blinded every 5 seconds. Plus, the layouts make it easy to backtrack without feeling lost, which is huge when you're hunting for like that one treasure chest that you happen to miss that has that weapon or accessory that you need. And since you can increase and decrease encounters, the pacing for these dungeons is super nice. I'm honestly becoming a fan of these toggles that we're getting in some of these remasters because having more control over the pacing like that makes both the grind and the exploration just that much faster and honestly more fun. Like back in the day, you'd play some JRPGs where you may do some grinding and you're happy with that, and then you realize that there's still an entire dungeon that you have to go through. Or, you know, a long corridor, or 3 of them. Looking at you, Final Fantasy X. And like I said, they just kind of nailed the vibe in this game. Like for the moment I set foot in Kaldisla, that quaint little wind-blown starter town with its swaying banners and mournful strings, it just feels like a place that existed long before you got there. Then later you hit Eternia, this sort of cold, arrogant, wrapped in iron and snow. It's not just a town, it's like a philosophy with a tax system. Every location in Luxembourg is just dripping with identity. The architecture, the weather, even the dang lighting, it all just kind of syncs up with what the crystals are tied to. It's not just dressing, it's like world building that kind of whispers rather than shouts. You get this sense that you're journeying through a world that feels lovingly curated. Every town has something to say, and every corner is trying to tell you a story. And in an age littered with these open world games, or games that feel like they're kind of designed to waste your time, Bravely Default's approach really hits different. It's tight, it feels intentional, and that kind of gives it this cozy, nostalgic vibe that I loved. Now listen, we need to talk about the story here, but this may be sort of spoiler light, so if you want to play this game blind, then jump to this timestamp here. Otherwise, welcome to the ride. Ready? Go! All right, let's first get this out of the way. Bravely Default doesn't exactly play all of its cards right up front. Early on, you've got your classic 4 heroes of light, you've got Tiz, Agnes, Ringabel, Edea, teaming up to restore the crystals, fight a mysterious empire, and I don't know, maybe figure out what Ringabel's deal is. Pretty standard JRPG stuff, right? Wrong. Because as the game progresses, you start noticing things don't quite add up, things that feel off, dialogue that hits different, bosses that feel oddly familiar. And then the game pulls a move that, at the time of release, was bold. Some might say infamous. Once you beat the game, what seems like a natural climax, you realize you're not done. Not even close. You're caught in a cycle that wants you to feel uncomfortable with it. It wants you to question why you're doing what you're doing. Because the story goes full meta in ways that were downright shocking back on the 3DS and still hit hard today. But I'll say this, you have to keep going. If you stop after the initial ending, you'll miss the actual point of the story. This isn't padding, this is narrative setup. The repetition, the slow shifts in the characters' responses, the ways the cracks in the world and your party begin to show. It all builds up to be one of the most memorable final stretches in a JRPG that I've ever played. For better or for worse, depending on who you're asking. But I think it's super interesting. Seriously though, if you don't push through to the true ending, it's like leaving the theater before you understand the rest of the story. And look, I get it. Repeating bosses can feel grindy, especially if you're overleveled, which, you know, guilty. But the context changes each time. The dialogue changes, the implications of what's happening start to shift with each cycle, and by the time you realize what's going on, you're all in, and there's no turning back. And that final act is absolutely worth getting through. The confrontation, the stakes, the music, it's the kind of thing that makes the whole journey worth it. The final boss feels earned. The ending hits hard, and yes, you'll probably want to go to YouTube and rewatch that ending theme more than once. So I think this story holds up brilliantly, but it requires you to trust it. Push past the repetition, dig deeper into the world, and you'll be rewarded with a layered narrative that actually has something to say. Not just about crystals or empires, but about cycles and identity and belief, and what you're willing to endure in search of truth. Speaking of meta. And to be honest, if you've seen any negativity about this ending, I wonder if they actually pushed all the way through to the true ending. Just saying. So, here's the million gil question. Is this HD remaster worth playing in 2025? In a world where JRPGs are dropping left and right like it's 1999 again? Yeah, I think it is, especially if you haven't played it. Bravely Default isn't just a nostalgia trip, it's a full-blown return to a very specific moment in time in JRPG history when we weren't sure if we'd ever get another game like this again. It brought back that turn-based combat with style, it modernized the job system, it gave us a compelling narrative with layers, and now it's back in full HD glory and retooled for the Switch 2, with that clean visual upgrade and thoughtful tweaks. And it was a blast, especially Theater Rhythm Bravely Default. Loved it. But Now we have to talk about it, the keycard situation. Look, if you've been living under a rock, here's basically what's going on. Nintendo gave third-party developers one option for Switch physical cartridges and their 64GB cards. Sounds all well and good, but it turns out those are kind of expensive. And most third-party studios aren't rolling in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe money. So instead of spending an arm and a leg and a Moogle tail for a physical edition, most devs, including Square Enix, have gone with a key card release, which is the alternative option. And that key card release is basically a cartridge that has a license to download the game. And look, I know it's better than a code in the box, but I'm gonna be real with you guys, I hate this. I don't know who key cards are meant for. If you're a digital buyer, why would you put plastic on your shelf? And if you're a physical collector like me, why would you want to download key in a box? I want to own my games if I'm going to purchase them. There's a reason I can enjoy retro games still. I can go back and I can play my old games. And it's because they're still on disc, they're still on cartridge, I can plop them in and I can play them. And I would love for that to be my experience in the future with the Switch 2 as well. Now, I know some of you are ready to shout, Square Enix dropped the ball! But hold up, I don't necessarily think this is about them. This is a Nintendo level decision. They limited the media options, and when that happens, developers are going to try to make the most money. Now, ironically, I don't think this is going to pan out for developers, and I think they're starting to see the cracks in this model because people like myself really don't want key cards. We just want the game. And personally, I would have bought this physically in a heartbeat if it was $10 more, which is basically the cost of the cartridge. Maybe I'm in the minority, but I don't think I am. Let me know in the comments. And frankly, I'm hoping Square comes around on this one and we see them turned from keycards to give us actual physical copies of the games. But I'm not getting my hopes up. So what I'm not saying with this video is that you should go buy the keycard. I think they're dumb. However, I still think that you should play this game. The game itself, the software is really, really good. And personally, I don't love digital either, but this is a great remaster of a fantastic JRPG. And it brings new life to a title that many missed the first time around. And if you don't care about the keycard situation, great, you do you. But I'm still gonna advocate for the actual physical copies any chance I get. Like I said, there's a reason I can go back and play my old games. Let's keep that going. And Square, if you're watching, I, for one, will buy a true physical cart for $10 more, especially if it's a remaster or remake. I hope Nintendo provides a better solution because I think this is ultimately on them, but in the meantime, keycards are not it. Anyway, let me know in the comments, have you picked this game up or do you plan to? And how many of you actually played this one back on the 3DS? And if you want to see some of those classic retro games that I did get to play that were physical and I can still play, go check these out. Thanks again to Square Enix for providing this code for me to test this one out, and I will see y'all in the next one.